Welcome to This Explainer. We're diving straight into a massive piece of history today, the Soviet-Afghan War. Back in December 1979, the silence of the snow-covered Afghan mountains was completely shattered. And what was supposed to be a quick, maybe few-month intervention, it devolved into a grueling, decade-long quagmire that literally changed the course of global history.
Just look at the reality of this conflict. It is a classic David versus Goliath scenario. You've got this massive, heavily armored Soviet military machinery trying to push into these incredibly unforgiving valleys. And they're clashing head-on with fiercely determined Mujahideen fighters. It was a modern military giant stepping into an environment that just flat-out resisted conventional warfare, using the rocky terrain as an impenetrable shield.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the December 1979 invasion.
Okay, so how did this actually start? Well, it's kind of like a rapid-fire domino effect. Back in 1978, internal political chaos erupts. The Tsar Revolution brings a communist government to power, and their radical reforms instantly spark widespread national resistance. The Afghan government is struggling to survive, so the Soviet Union makes a fateful choice. On Christmas Day, December 25, 1979, thousands of Soviet troops surge across the border. Their impact is brutal and immediate. Soviet special forces assassinate President Hafizullah Amin in Operation Storm 333. And by late 79, they install a fully Soviet-backed leader, Babrak Karmal. They really thought this quick decapitation strike would bring swift stability.
Moving on to Section 2, a global proxy war.
But, as you can probably guess, it didn't secure peace at all. Instead, local Mujahideen resistance groups banded together, and they quickly caught the attention of the world. Because this is the height of the Cold War, right? So the United States, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, they see a strategic gold mine. Through programs like the CIA's Operation Cyclone, they start funneling billions, literally billions of dollars in weapons, funding, and military training to the Mujahideen. Almost overnight, the scale and lethality of this localized fight exploded into a sprawling proxy war.
Next up, Section 3, the asymmetrical battlefield. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth did this drag on for 10 years? Well, look at this massive operational mismatch. The Soviets brought the absolute works: advanced tanks, helicopters, fighter jets, overwhelming firepower. In a traditional war, they're a nearly unstoppable force. But actually, scratch that. This wasn't a traditional war. The Mujahideen didn't play by those conventional rules. They possessed intimate knowledge of the land and extreme guerrilla mobility. They essentially turned every harsh mountain pass and deep valley into a deadly ambush point, and they'd strike and then just vanish into the landscape before the Soviets could even mount a response.
Which brings us to Section 4, the 1986 turning point.
For years, it's this brutal stalemate in the harsh terrain. But then, in 1986, we see a real game changer, the Stinger anti-aircraft missile. These were highly portable, shoulder-fired weapons supplied to the Mujahideen. Before this, Soviet helicopters just navigated the valleys with total impunity, raining terror from above. But once individual fighters could reliably target and shoot down those gunships from the high mountain peaks, wow, the skies were no longer safe. Soviet pilots were forced to fly at much higher altitudes, which completely destroyed their bombing accuracy. Just like that, the Soviets' primary strategic advantage was totally erased.
So put yourself in the Soviet leadership's shoes for a second. You're facing a neutralized military advantage in the skies, and you have to ask yourself an incredibly difficult question. How do you sustain a war when the costs keep rising, casualties mount, and opposition at home grows? Well, the reality is, you don't. The financial drain on the Soviet economy was becoming catastrophic. The death toll was steadily rising, and the political will back in Moscow was completely fracturing. The unavoidable result was a full retreat. On February 15, 1989, a truly historic moment happens. Soviet Lieutenant General Boris Gromov becomes the last soldier to cross the Friendship Bridge, officially exiting Afghanistan. That confident intervention, originally expected to last just a few months, it ended up being a humbling, agonizing withdrawal after nearly 10 years of warfare.
Let's look at our final section, Section 5, a devastating global legacy.
The ripple effects of this single invasion are absolutely staggering, and it's absolutely crucial we understand them. First off, the human cost was immeasurable. Millions of Afghan civilians were forced to become refugees, and widespread destruction just leveled entire cities and villages. But it didn't stop there. The immense financial and human toll severely weakened the Soviet superpower, directly contributing to its complete dissolution just 2 years later, in 1991. And tragically, the Soviet departure didn't bring peace.
It left a massive power vacuum that ignited a brutal Afghan civil war, creating the exact conditions for the Taliban to eventually rise to power. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this powerful final thought. History reminds us that wars may begin with confidence, but their consequences can echo for generations. This war was so much more than a battle between two armies. It was shaped by ideology, intense foreign intervention, and profound national resilience. So, knowing how deeply this single confident intervention fractured the modern world, what current global conflicts might be echoing into our own future? Thank you so much for exploring this vital piece of history with me today.